This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Kolchak the Night Stalker, episodes 17 and 18.
Among the philosophers, the great thinkers, and the common Joes of this world, no question is more controversial than truth. Remarkable as it may seem, I can attest that the following events did occur, whether you believe them to be true or not.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast that has turned our brains into onion dip. I'm Luke, here's my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Was that a line in this? I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe someone tells Kolchak his mind has been turned into onion dip.
I mean, it's an insult. I don't know if it's a good insult.
I mean, you wouldn't like it if you got it.
No one would, but I mean, I'd get over it, is what I'm saying.
Save it for work, Jordan. Whip it out there. You love whipping out
tomorrow?
These things at work.
Yeah. It's not going to happen, but I could. Theoretically, I could.
Well, we're back from our Kolchak, and since we're getting close to the end of the series, we decided to bring a returning Kolchak guest back to talk about Kolchak, comparing it to the start to the beginning. Welcome back, Jane, to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be back. I had a great time in my first two Kolchak episodes, so I was looking forward to returning and going at it again.
Have you been keeping up with the Kolchak episodes?
I haven't. I thought I was going to, but I definitely haven't. I think I tried to watch like one more episode after the ones that were on that we did together, but no, I've just skipped right over to these ones now.
This is great news for me because we've got a brand new game we're going to try out this week. Inaugural game. It's going to happen.
Okay.
It's the Jane game. Jordan, sing the theme song.
How's that?
Great, that's perfect for the Jane game.
I'll
That's
cut something else
awesome.
in instead.
I love it.
What it is I'm going to quiz you, Jane, on Monsters of the Week, and you're going to tell me whether it's Kolchak, whether it's X-Files, or whether it's both.
Oh, cool. I'll probably know if it's X-Files, but I definitely won't know if it's both. And okay, yeah, wait, let's do it. I'm excited.
As our X-Files, resident X-Files expert, I thought this would be an excellent way of seeing what you can get.
All right,
So I've
I'm
got
ready
11,
to embarrass myself at this point.
I've got 11 questions. So shall we begin?
Okay.
Was this a Monster of the Week on Kolchak, X-Files, or both? A robot.
A robot. Well, what kind of robot? Because X-Files had like a cockroaches episode where there was like a robotic cockroach, but it wasn't really the monster of the week. It was just sort of a red herring. So I'm going to go with Kolchak.
That's correct.
Okay.
Ding, ding, ding. 1 point, Jane. Jordan,
All right.
keep track of these points.
Yeah, that's one.
All right. Your next question. A moss man.
Oh, there was definitely a Moss Man in the X-Files. I think there were actually a couple of Moss Men related episodes. In the
That's
first,
odd.
Well, in the first season, there was the Jersey Devil, which were like these kind of like, I don't know if these count as Moss Men, but they were like these sort of savage forest people, like kind of like a Bigfoot kind of characters. And then there was a later episode, which I can't put my finger on, where like they basically went back to the same woods and it was kind of the same story. And there was definitely a Moss Man. He like would camouflage himself into a tree and then like come out of the tree. So I'm going to go with X-Files.
No, I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'm talking about a man literally made of moss.
Oh, okay. Well,
I could have
fine.
clarified.
So there was a Kolchak episode with a Moss Man?
Yes, the Spanish moss murderers.
Oh, interesting. He was a Spanish Moss Man.
He was
From
a Spanish
Spain.
moss man.
Okay.
You could tell from the accent. All right, next up, a pyrokinetic killer.
There's 100% an X-Files episode with a pyrokinetic killer. So, but it's a very popular kind of trope of horror. including the upcoming or recently released movie Firestarter, which I've heard is fantastic, guys, just in case you want to go see it.
Lies.
So I'm going to go with both.
You are correct. It was both. That was the X-Files. The episode was called Fire, and on Kolchak it was called Firefall.
Nice.
You know what's funny, Luke? I remember the X-Files episode, but I don't remember the Kolchak episode.
To be fair, Jordan, he was also a ghost.
He was a ghost and he was fire?
Yeah, he's lit people on fire as a ghost.
Wow.
Still can't remember.
One of the best episodes of the show. Anyway, we'll continue while Jordan mulls that over. So you're 2 for 11, Jane. Here's your next
I'm not
question.
2 for 11. You haven't asked me 11 questions yet.
She's 2 for 3.
Yeah, but I mean, out of the 11 so far.
No, I'm 2 for 3. Let's get this straight. Off we go.
All right, Jane. The missing link.
Well, okay, so like I said, there's this episode called The Jersey Devil that was kind of like about these like savage people, forest Bigfoot people. So I'm gonna also say both.
You're correct. It is both. It was X-Files' Jersey Devil and Kolchak's Primal Scream.
Ooh, very nice. Primal Scream. That sounds exciting.
It was not that good.
Oh.
All right, Jane. Your next question. Evil computer.
Oh, there was totally Evil Computer in the X-Files. It was also a season 1 episode. Actually, there were several Evil Computer episodes, but there was one that killed people in an elevator in a building, and then there was another one where the computer got possessed by a dead scientist and killed people inside of like what's one of those rooms with a giant fan that
Jerry Springer set?
Like a turbine room. Jerry Springer set. So that was, I would say, X-Files. And I don't think Kolchak is very computery. Like there's not a lot of tech in there except for his typewriter, so X-Files.
You're right. It's just X-Files. And you're right also, X-Files had 3 separate evil computer episodes.
Right.
What about the one where they went into the video game? Does that count?
Oh yeah,
I
the
counted
VR
it.
one. That's the third one.
Yeah.
It was
that episode sucked.
It's not a good episode.
It was Ghost in the Machine, the AI, and first person shooter.
Nice. Yeah.
All right, next up, werewolf.
Oh, there was for sure a werewolf episode in the X-Files. It was called Shapes. And there was a werewolf episode in Kolchak. Didn't I do that episode? Or I watched it. Maybe it was... Anyway, it's both.
Yeah, you're right. That's both. And you even knew the name of the episode of X-Files. I'm very impressed. Shapes.
Thank you. All
right, next up, Jack the Ripper.
That sounds like Kolchak. I'm pretty sure there was no Jack the Ripper X-Files episode.
Correct. There you go. Next up, Evil Tattoo.
Oh, that was an X-Files episode. There was an evil it was like a lady, and she like said seductive things and then forced this guy to kill people. X-Files.
No, that's correct. You didn't go both. I like it.
I remember that episode too.
It was weird.
Wasn't it Jodie Foster played the evil tattoo?
Yes, that is totally correct.
Next up, Sea Monster.
There was a Sea Monster X-Files episode. It was really funny. It was the episode where Scully got Queequeg, which was her dog for a while. Anyway, so there was that one. And I'm going to say that Kolchak may have also had a Sea Monster episode. So I'm going to go with both.
I'm sorry, it was only the X-Files this time. You were correct, though. It was Quagmire, it was called. If the synopsis I read was correct, Queequeg gets eaten in that episode.
Oh, what's the episode where Queequeg dies? Oh, no. I got it backwards.
I should say, though, you're right, Jane. It does feel like Kolchak should have had a sea creature episode, but weirdly they haven't. I guess because he'd have to leave those same streets he drives around all the time.
I think, yeah, maybe the budget for water stuff was too much. But, like, Chicago's on the water. Like, there could be a sea monster in the harbor, like, in the docks of Chicago, in the industrial
maybe episode 20.
sector. Maybe.
I mean, Jordan, he took that cruise, but he just fought a werewolf on that one.
That's true. He did go on a cruise. That should, instead of werewolf, it should have been sea monster.
All right.
There was a werewolf on a cruise?
Yeah, it's the best. I'm obsessed with that concept now. All right, next up, zombie.
Zombie. So there was an X-Files zombie episode, and there was also a Kolchak one, so both.
I'm going to give it to you. I didn't actually find the X-Files one, but I'm going to believe you on this one.
Yeah, but it's like based in like Haitian. It's like a Haitian zombie.
Well, that's
story.
just like Kolchak then.
It's there's a guy, but he doesn't like walk like a zombie and attack people in that way. But
I'll
there's
give
a
it
guy
to you.
who comes
You're
back
the
to
expert.
life. And anyways, yeah, it wasn't a great episode, but it exists.
And finally, your last question. Inbred hillbillies.
Oh, that is very clearly an X-Files episode. That episode was banned. I'm sure you read about this, Luke, or you knew about this, that it was banned from television after it aired. It was called Home, and it was only available to watch on the video or DVD collection of the X-Files if you bought it, because it was considered to be, so
I remember
terrible.
watching it live with my brother, and I was horrified.
Yeah,
I remember
when they
going to
pull
bed,
the mother
and it was
out
like I
from
couldn't
under
go to
the
sleep.
bed and
Yeah.
she's on the little rolly cart, and she has no arms and legs, and it was just like, it was terrible.
Yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah. But I'm going to say just the X-Files for that one.
Oh, this one's a trick question, Jane.
Why? How can it be a trick
So we
question?
might not count it in your total as because it's a trick question. It's a trick question because, yes, X-Files Home is correct, but one of the unproduced scripts for the final episodes of Kolchak was going to be about inbred hillbillies in the Appalachian Mountains he runs into.
Oh, no way. But then they didn't make it.
They didn't make it. It only got
I
the
think
script
Jane still
back.
gets the point for that one.
I think I get a point because it is not a Kolchak episode, and it was probably banned. It was banned from television in 1995. It was definitely banned from television in 1973 or whatever.
That's true. I'm gonna. That's the 11th question, which we're just gonna discount entirely since it was a trick question. So
Okay.
out of 10, you got 8. Very good.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good.
You
And I
were
think most
very
of the
good.
ones that I got wrong were ones that were both. I didn't get any X-Files ones wrong.
No, you didn't get you got one wrong that was both, and then you were a little too liberal in what you thought a moss man was when you should have literally just thought of a man made of moss.
Right. Fair enough. I'll take it.
We always say that about you. You're a little too liberal with what you consider a moss man.
I have to be careful of that.
Yeah.
Well, that was a fun game. That worked out all right.
That was great.
But let's get moving on to the episode. Here is the IMDb summary for episode 17, Legacy of Terror. Reporter Carl Kolchak investigates Chicago citizens having their hearts cut out by Aztecs.
That's kind of a spoiler for the episode.
Right to the meat, this synopsis, right to the meat.
I'm glad I didn't read that before I watched the episode.
Hey, how much research do you think they put into the costumes the people wear? How
I think they
authentic
went
do you
to
think
Mardi
these were?
Gras.
Yeah.
Those were
Yeah.
those look like kind of expensive costumes. Like they were quite elaborate. I'm sure Luke will describe them when we get to the part with the synopsis. But I actually thought they were interesting. Like they weren't culturally accurate, but they were visually interesting for the
Yes,
show.
well, it begins, as most Kolchak episodes do, with a couple of murders. One is just we watch some stock footage of a football player running around, and Kolchak explains that one of the Chicago Bears linebackers has had his heart cut out.
That was, can I just interrupt? I'm sorry, right at the beginning. That was very weird that the first murder they didn't actually show. They just showed stock footage of a football game and stock footage of an ambulance driving, and Kolchak described it, and then they just went right to the second murder. Isn't that weird? Did any of the
It
other
was
episodes
weird.
of Kolchak
They
do that?
decided they needed 2 murders to start, but they couldn't film one of them. I thought the same thing. It was like, I'm like, why just not have that be a murder then? Just have the guy you want to show get murdered.
Yeah. Or put that murder second. Like start with the murder that you're going to have on screen, and then put the thing about the football player as the second murder.
Right, it could even just be on the radio you could hear about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure why either. And it seemed a shame because it was like, how great would it be to have a Chicago Bear doing a cameo on this? I do wonder, though, and I'll float this now, and it's a bit of a preview to what's coming in this episode, but the conclusion of this episode all takes place in a hockey arena because they're like, it's got the tallest stairs in Chicago. I wonder if an early draft of this had them at the football like it was going to all tie back to this football stadium that they weren't allowed to come into the football stadium.
Yeah, that's very possible because the hockey arena, and I was sort of like, well, I guess that's the only place they could get, because the hockey arenas are not the largest stadiums. Like when they were talking about the reason why
the
they're
highest
using
stairs? Not a hockey place.
It's not going to be unless that's the only stadium that exists, which it isn't. So
the Bears were like, no way, but the Blackhawks were like, get on in here, Kolchak.
Also, that was a weird bit of information that Kolchak picked up on. That he's like, I've noticed that all these people died on higher and higher staircases. I was like, man, I never would have noticed that.
Yeah, but seems to be pretty common for Kolchak. He jumps to the conclusions that he needs to jump to in order to get us to the end, because we only have 45 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's talk about the second murder that we do see. It's a staff sergeant back from Vietnam. He's leaving his job as a recruiter for the army, and he hears something odd in the stairwell as he walks by. He sticks his head in, and these people in very flamboyant costumes, a panther, a parrot of some sort, and they start ripping his heart out.
They just come at him, and there's like a fluty kind of noise, music, like this flute, and then there's a shadow of a guy with like a beak on and a hat, and then these sort of flashes of these feather arms coming at him, and then they have this like very weird little panther arm, like this kind of spotted paw that is like it's like they put a prop on a stick, and then they put it up to his chest, and they're pulling at his shirt, and it rips open, and then
I think he has a little scratch down his chest.
I guess.
I liked the flute music every time anyone dies in this. Just like real life, if you hear a flute and you're not expecting it, you're gonna die.
It is a whole to-do, right? To have a flautist come out when you're doing a murder?
Yeah, I think at some point we should talk about this ritual and what it actually entails, because it's definitely quite labor intensive.
It's expensive. Yeah, there's a lot of people involved.
Yeah.
I mean, we can have a little chat about it. Like, it appears to be a group of, 5 to 6 people in flamboyant costumes will cut the heart out of a strong person. But what we learned at the end is they're all, in the olden times, it would have been a warrior who's unwillingly dying. So in this case, it's a football player and a war hero. That's the equivalent in modern times. And for whatever reason, the heart also has to be cut out with a very blunt knife. Like, that is made very clear to us. It's like, it looks like it was real hard to cut this heart out.
You got to earn it.
And Jordan, and I think this is what you were talking about a little bit earlier, each successive murder, and this is what Kolchak will notice, is when the victim dies, the heart is left on the stairs below the victim, but at lower and lower stair duration. So 5, 7, 9. It just keeps getting left at a lower stair.
It's a very, very specific thing that he's noticing this about the heart. And he notices it at the very first time when he sees the first murder victim, that he counts the number of, how many steps below the body is the heart, and he counts down. And who would think to do that? Well, only Kolchak, apparently.
Also, I don't think they ever give us any explanation for why the heart is left at a lower staircase other than it just is.
No, it's a ritual. That's all you ever have to say in any of these. You just do whatever you want, and then you say, oh, it's a ritual. You're good.
Anyway, Kolchak at this point doesn't know about any of these murders. He's actually running late to join Vincenzo and Updike at a publishers conference at a high-end hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very long sequence in which Vincenzo and Updike are like walking around, like wondering where Kolchak is. There's a whole thing made of like, what time is it? Is it Greenwich Mean Time or real time? It doesn't matter. He's still late. And then they wander out of the lobby of the hotel to the front door, just as Kolchak is pulling up in his car. And then Kolchak gets out of his car, gives it to the valet, starts to walk towards the door of the hotel, and then his police radio goes off, and he's just like, never mind, I gotta go. And he turns around and he takes the car back from the valet and just drives away. And Vincenzo and Updike are just left standing there being like, what the hell is going on?
It was a cute sequence. Actually, I enjoyed it because I don't even know if Kolchak says anything up until the moment he like hits the gas in his car and drives away. It's like a weirdly silent moment for Kolchak. Also, I noticed something that apparently Updike in this episode, he tells Vincenzo he's decided to start smoking the pipe as an affectation to make himself look smarter. Jordan, I think you should consider it.
Yeah.
I thought of you, Jordan, as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, with the pipe. I was like, this is something that Jordan could do. Because, yeah, he describes how people thought that it made him seem more approachable.
Oh, it will make me more approachable?
So I'm trying to help you out. See, that's how.
Oh, okay. I could get invited to more parties, am I right?
Consider it, Jordan. It might be a good thing for you.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize I was so unapproachable I needed an affectation, but I'll take the note.
At any rate, the radio, what he hears on the police radio is there's a 187. He's basically off to see that crime scene that we described with the dead staff sergeant. And this is where he goes and sees the body and the heart, and he's sort of now on the case of this odd murder. And this, he'll go to it's very funny. He goes to visit the murder, and he just turns his car around and goes back to the convention. So it was like a real quick, we get him there, and then we get him back immediately. And when he gets back to the convention, Vincenzo introduces Kolchak to a Captain Timmins, the first woman to qualify for combat in the U.S. Air Force.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was interesting. So they basically go on this thing about how they're trying to drum up press about opportunities for women in the Air Force, and how she's qualified for all of these things, but she's not actually in combat yet. And they do point that out. It's like, yeah, she's qualified, but she hasn't had combat yet. And also, everyone keeps talking over her. And at one point, the other woman who's there, who I think is the PR lady, is like, maybe one of you should let her finish the sentence if you think she's so great, basically. And the woman's like, thank you. Because they just kept interrupting her.
I really like that, because in the last several episodes of Kolchak we've seen, he's been a real problematic with women of late. And I'm like, oh, it's nice of them to have a writer come in and like have this great bit where they acknowledge like Vincenzo and this other major are just perpetually talking over this woman.
Yeah, and there's actually a whole bunch of stuff in this episode that's kind of a little bit about like women in the workplace and like the role of women and men, and so much so that I actually, and as we go I'll talk about this, but like I was really actually surprised by the unfolding of this episode. A bunch of stuff happened that I didn't expect was going to happen, that I didn't see coming. Mostly, I think, because I was preoccupied by like the feminist bent that the episode was taking, and was enjoying it and making notes on it. And then I was blindsided by like some of the twists in a good way. And so I really enjoyed the episode because I found it less predictable than some of the other ones.
Well, who comes along next is more important in this scene, because wandering by is the hotel's new vice president and his entourage of all-female staff. And of course, we see him because he mistakes that Air Force major for some sort of concierge. So we get the idea that this gentleman named Mr. Pepe Torres is a bit of a dumb guy. He's kind of looks like he's kind of got that surfer attitude, but he's got a real nice leisure suit on.
Eric Estrada.
It's freaking Eric Estrada, and I was so excited. But again, like, it didn't occur to me that he might actually have a part in this episode. I was just like, oh, it's Eric Estrada early in his career in a walk-on role. Like, I just figured he was playing, like, because there had just been like comments about they were talking about feminism and stuff, and then he came in and was kind of a bit of a misogynist to the lady, the Air Force lady. I sort of was like just fooled by that being the purpose of the interaction. I didn't like gauge that he was going to have a bigger part in the story. So when he reappeared later, I was genuinely surprised that he had a bigger part. Anyway, it was fun.
Yes, this Pepe Torres will end up playing a big role in it. It's a very odd introduction for sure. I did not know what to make of it, because they're like, he's the vice president. I'm like, okay. And you can tell that the other staff don't like him. But what happens once we leave this scene is this Captain Timmins has gone back up to her hotel room, and as she's getting ready for bed, she hears the ominous sounds of a flute playing.
To be fair, that is a bad sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's not what you want when you're about to go to bed in a hotel.
Yeah.
Like the guy next to you starts playing the flute.
Exactly.
But Kolchak soon hears about another murder on his police scanner and arrives at another staircase, this one a ways away from the hotel, only to find Captain Timmins with her heart cut out and left like 9 steps below her body. And as Kolchak's kind of like snapping photos of the gruesome crime scene, the parrot costume man shows up and shoves him off the staircase, knocking him unconscious.
Yeah, so she's in the hotel, and her room gets broken into by a birdman, but then we don't see her murdered, and then she's discovered murdered on the staircase. So presumably they took her to the staircase in order to murder her and do this thing, which to me is like, that was really the first tip off that the staircase was a thing. Because the earlier murder, the guy had just been like leaving the building, and maybe he decided to take the stairs and was killed on the stairs. But this one, it was like, oh no, they didn't kill her in her room. They took her to this other location.
And they couldn't find any stock footage of stairs for the football player, so...
Yeah, maybe that was it. Maybe they shot the whole thing, and they're like, damn it, we don't have any stairs. Oh, well, cut it out.
But Kolchak's eventually woken by paramedics at the scene, and he manages to have grabbed a handful of feathers, which will come in handy later. But now he knows something's really up, and he returns to the hotel and hoping to beat the police back to Captain Timmons' room because he's not sure that she's been identified by them yet. Unfortunately, when he gets there, the police have already cordoned off her room. So much like other Kolchak episodes we've seen, he's like, all right, I'll just find a bellhop's costume or a busboy costume, and I'll just sneak past the police and then sneak into a room. He does this all the time. It's very common. But they put a twist on the formula this time because as he's trying to get there, Vincenzo and Updike are there for the conference. And as he's walking by, they're like, what are you doing, Kolchak? Why are you dressed like a busboy? And really blow his cover.
And then the cop's like, he's one of yours, and then chases him out of the room. Yeah, that was I feel like when I was sort of watching this, I was sort of feeling like Kolchak had kind of found its feet in terms of some of the comedy beats that I think work well with it. There was an earlier beat that I didn't want to interrupt you, so I didn't mention it, but when he goes to the first murder scene with the guy in the staircase, the army guy in the staircase, they're shooting. They have a shot of the staircase and the dead guy and the blood, and there's two cops, and they're sitting over the body, and they're talking about, oh, it looks like his heart was cut out. And then just in the corner of the frame, this tape recorder is lowered down into the upper right corner of the frame next to the police, and is just sitting there for like a beat or two. And then the police notice it, and they go, hey, and it's Kolchak, and he's up on the staircase above, and he's like recording. But it was just funny. Like, it was just like this cute little quirky, funny moment that I thought was great and clever and kind of in exactly the right vibe for I think what this show ought to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think this episode, while still not one of the better episodes of Kolchak, I think the tone's it's on the mark. Kolchak's being funny. Like even the scene here where he gets spotted by Vincenzo and Updike. We've seen him change so many times and pull the same scam so many times. It was a nice way to keep it fresh, and it was a funny reversal of how it usually goes. So I really liked it. And like you said, the cop obviously is like, sees them talking. He's like, hey, you don't work here, and chases Kolchak downstairs, where I don't think we see this often on TV when someone dresses up in costume, but Kolchak actually goes to where he hid his own original clothing and has to grab it out of like a bin.
Yeah, and gets changed.
Yeah, puts his regular jacket back on and his hat.
But it involves him running and hiding in a closet or a storage area to get away from this cop. And while he's in his storage area, he finds a big painting with a man in a parrot outfit. He's like, "Oh, this is just like the thing I saw." And he turns around and he finds a sarcophagus. As he like pulls the mask off of the body in the sarcophagus, which I don't know what he thought was going to be under there, but he's terrified to find a like mummified body.
And then he finds himself locked in the storage room that he's been hiding out in, and so has to bang like a crazy person on the inside of the door, being like, let me out of here, let me out of here. And so then he is promptly like, the next shot is like him being detained by security because obviously he gave himself away and now he's been caught.
But does no one else that works in the hotel, no one else has gone into this storage room to see this coffin or whatever?
Well, no, the lady, so when he's coming downstairs running away from the cop, he goes kind of in one direction down a hallway, and then this other lady who's coming out, it's one of the women, one of Pepe's women, which we don't know that yet, but she's like a very attractive blonde lady, and she's been coming in out of the storage room, and she's the one who actually locks it. Kolchak runs in, and she turns back around and locks it and then leaves. So I'm gathering that the storage room is kind of the purview of
right.
Pepe.
It's a little off limits.
Yeah, it's the VP, like Pepe's little storage, and he's kind of in charge of what goes on there. And
I'm just saying, it's very hard to take him seriously with the name Pepe.
Here's the thing: is I only ever heard him referred to by the staff as Mr. Torres, and then Kolchak kept calling him Pepe. I'm not sure if that was not just Kolchak like giving him a slurring nickname.
No, I don't think so. I thought his name was Pepe Torres. Am I wrong?
Maybe it was. Maybe I only ever heard anyone call him Mr. Torres.
I'll look it up. In all my notes, I just wrote Eric Estrada.
I wrote either VP or Pepe most of the time.
Usually PP. But yeah, you're right. It's a very great sequence. And it's like you're saying, the tone is really good for Kolchak here. Is he's immediately a coward, banging on a door, begging to get locked out, which means he's immediately caught for being down there. When we get a hard cut and the police have dragged him up to the public relations person of the hotel to like ask if she wants to press charges against him. She seems to have a soft spot for Kolchak because he's a bit of a, he's a ne'er-do-well, but he's a kind one. So she kind of like gives him a pass. She's like, don't worry about it, cops. Well, I'm going to let him go for this one. And Kolchak uses this moment to talk to her and ask about that vice president. What's up with your vice president Pepe? You didn't seem to like him earlier in the episode. And she kind of goes on to say off the record that he's a bit of an idiot and like for whatever reason the owners installed him as VP a year ago and it was really out of the blue. And she's, and it's kind of this thing of Kolchak's like, it's really weird since you're competent that you would be like not promoted. And she's like, yes, it is weird, isn't it?
And I still thought this was another subplot about how women don't get recognized for their work, just like the Air Force lady. And so I was still like completely focused on this part of the story and I thought it was interesting and cool. And so it still didn't occur to me that there was something actually weird about Mr. Torres. I was just like, oh yeah, she should have got promoted, but she didn't because she's a lady. And that's where I left it.
Both things can be true.
They both definitely can be true. But yeah, I certainly wasn't as wise to plot as Kolchak seemed to be.
And let me just note that Eric Estrada's character is in fact Pepe Torres.
Okay, good.
According to who?
IMDb.
Well, that seems trustworthy. At any rate, Kolchak goes across the hall. He's just like, you know what? I really got to meet this VP, this Pepe Torres character. And he sort of barges into the VP's office where Pepe's just sitting there practicing the murder flute with his, really, in this scene as he walks in, it's like he's really got a Manson-esque cabal of female staff around him.
Yeah, this was where I was finally like, oh, he's the flute guy. Like I did not realize until that moment that he was the flute guy. And then of course he had all of these women around him. I'm like, okay, there's some sort of, witchy kind of magic that's supposed to be happening with him and the flute and stuff. And yeah, but I was way behind the 8 ball on this plot.
I love that Kolchak like flat out comes out and he's just like, hey, what's up with the storage room down there with that mummy locked in it? And like they eject him from the room, but no one involved in this cult at all seems to be all that concerned that Kolchak like saw that mummy. They're just like, just get out of here, buddy. They have no concerns about Kolchak whatsoever. And even walking into the lion's den and admitting he's seen everything.
Well, how many murders are they away at this point for, I'm going to say it for lack of a better term, but like fulfilling the prophecy?
Well, they've done
fulfilling the
3
tradition.
at this point. They've done the football player, the army man, and the Air Force lady.
Right. And how many do they have to do? 5?
5, but as we find out, the 5th one is a special murder, which
right.
We'll get to.
Kolchak, of course, he's at a bit of dead end. So what he does, he's like, I've got this handful of feathers I grabbed off that parrot costume. So the only thing I can do is go visit an expert on parrots, which is a taxidermist who he's hoping will tell him where these feathers came from, which is a stretch, I thought, but sure, okay.
Now, in terms of the people that Kolchak has gone to, this was not one of the best ones, but it's not the worst. But it's in classic tradition of him is that like if he's starting to think this is, I don't even know at this point if he thinks it's an Aztec type murder, he doesn't go to speak to some sort of proper authority. He always goes to some odd, area. He's like, I'm going to talk to a locksmith who once rented an apartment to a Mexican. You're like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I think a part of it I think the impression that I get with a lot of Kolchak's interrogations, and I know you guys have seen more episodes than me, is like he's going to people that are already disaffected and disgruntled because those people will be more likely to help him out, either because they just feel like they need to have their story told, or they feel like they want to be listened to, or because they're broke and he can bribe them. So I'm guessing that's why he doesn't go to like, I'm going to go to an ornithologist and find out what this this feather is. It's like, I'm going to go to a taxidermist, and immediately upon arriving at the taxidermist comes in swinging. Like, the taxidermist is sure that Kolchak is there to discredit him, to make fun of him, to mock him and his profession, the way that journalists of the past have like discredited taxidermists and used, infantilized them by using terms like stuffed animal. Like, he goes on this rant. And then Kolchak has to be like, oh, no, I really respect taxidermy. And the guy's like, oh, you do? Well, in that case, let me tell you about how honorable I think this profession is. And then he goes on a rant about how the original people who created Egyptian mummies were like the original great taxidermists of the world, and how being an undertaker is a branch of taxidermy, and has this whole kind of thing that he goes on about to Kolchak. And so then Kolchak's like, okay, I think I can get some information out of this guy.
It sounds like the guy had thought about it before, He was ready to go.
He was ready to go. Well, that's what I said. That's what I mean. He's been disaffected by society, and he's not feeling great about, himself or other people. And so he's easily manipulated by Kolchak's wily ways.
Yeah, I mean, that taxidermist knows what's up. Not to listen to the lamestream media.
That's right.
I think what you said, though, is completely correct. And I think the reason he goes to a taxidermist this episode is more for plot purposes in some ways, because the taxidermist can then be linked to mummification, which is going to link it back to learning that these parrot feathers are from southern Mexico, and the taxidermist, since he's into mummification of humans, is going to be like, well, who was great at that? Aztecs. And that's sort of allowing them to kill a few birds with one stone in the case of this scene.
Yeah, and it's actually, I'm guessing this was at a time where there was probably a little bit less public awareness about, about the like ancient history in Mexico and Central America, because I think they really spent quite a bit of time sort of trying to link Aztecs with Egyptian mythology so that people would understand that it was kind of the same. Oh, we're living in the same world of like mummification and rituals and mummies waking up and that sort of thing. But this time it's in Mexico.
Exactly. And of course, Kolchak will then, with this information, sort of start investigating the hotel chain, because he learns that it's originally from Mexico, and that if he looks into papers around the places this hotel has chained, like it's a hotel chain, so they have hotels everywhere. But it seems that every 52 years there seems to be a string of murders where 5 victims get their hearts cut out in and around sort of this hotel chain that has originated in Mexico.
What I like, though, is that it's around here either before or after, where he goes back to the office to kind of pitch his story that he's putting together for Vincenzo. And even for Kolchak episodes, like, the leaps of logic he has to make this story make sense, even though, of course, Kolchak is correct and it is this Aztec tradition for these murders. It's like Vincenzo's just like, you're losing it. Like, this is too much even for you. And I almost feel like it was the writers kind of putting in that, like, we know how ridiculous this is. Even everyone else would think it's ridiculous except for Kolchak. And I thought that was kind of a nice little point.
Yeah, there were a couple of beats of that. And there was also another funny beat where I was like, this is exactly the right tone, where Kolchak, in order to get all of the information he needs from the taxidermist, of course, he has to agree to buy something. So in the next scene, we have like the scene opens with like Vincenzo like staring at this ugly ass taxidermed mouse. And, basically Kolchak is asking Vincenzo to sign off on like the petty cash voucher so that he can get reimbursed for buying this weird mouse. And then Vincenzo says, get it out of here. And so Kolchak goes and hides it on like inside of a book on Updike's desk. And then there's a whole gag where Updike like wanders into the office and sits down and lifts up this piece of paper and then like is madly startled by this taxidermed mouse under his, and it's all done like he doesn't say anything. It's just all kind of, it's like a bit of a silent film gag almost, where he comes in and finds this mouse. And I thought it was funny.
They had quite a few nice little like bits with the whole Office cast this episode, where you kind of just, it's what they do really well, but never enough. I think, in my opinion, is like when they bring the other characters in the Office into it, it's always more fun.
Yeah.
And we've said it a million times, and it's we just know it's not going to happen. It's episode 18 or 17, whatever it is now, and it hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen. But the show is desperate for some team ups, and even at the beginning of this episode, again, I thought, hey, Vincenzo and Ron Updike are here at the hotel. Maybe they're going to get involved in this action in some way and have something to do with the plot, or there'll be that thing of they get to see Kolchak and his weird world, but the show just is desperate not to do that. So it's like, yeah, they're there in Mexico too. Anyway, and it's just like, why not have them be part of it? And it just, we've seen it time and time again that for whatever reason, it's Kolchak a solo. It doesn't matter. No matter if it makes sense or not, he's a solo character.
Yeah. It's interesting because I sort of thought that there might be, something more involved as well, because they set up this whole conference and so, okay, people are going to be around. But I guess maybe it's just that kind of old school television thinking where it's like, no, it's just about Kolchak. Let's just stick with him.
Yeah.
And stick with them it does. As he continues his investigation, he knows about Mexico and the parrots now, so he heads to the Mexican consulate to try to get more details. Where, it's so funny, the guy who works at consulate's like, I don't know, man, I deal with business development. I don't know what you want from me.
Well, the cultural attaché was like away and wasn't coming back for a while, which I don't think they ever really resolved that. But this is one of my questions going through this is like, who is it that's actually performing this ritual? Because there's like 5 guys, and
we'll never meet them.
But is one of them weird, the cultural attaché? This I'm curious about, and we can only speculate because we have no idea who these are. But the cultural attaché was not there, and
well, that's right, because I thought it was going to be that they were, for lack of a better terms, like zombies or spirits, or they had been brought in some sort of weird, mysterious, mystical way, not just like dudes that are into it.
But I think
that we never learn about.
Were into it. I think.
It's so you can be scared because it could be your friends and neighbors.
Could be anyone.
I guess so.
Put on some parrot costume.
I think they do explain, ultimately, it's the owners of the hotel chain. We just never meet them.
Oh, I see.
Because what happens is he goes to the consulate. They can't help him, but they say, hey, there's an exhibit of myths and mysteries of ancient Mexico getting put on by a local university professor. Why don't you go talk to him? Kolchak goes there, and I really like this university professor. He could not be less interested in talking to Kolchak at all. Kolchak just kind of annoys him into like talking to him.
He just wants Kolchak to sign up for his courses. He's like, here's my brochure. Come sign up for one of my courses.
There is some other professor there who's like starving for attention, though, and keeps begging Kolchak to write about his department. I think it was like physics or something.
Yeah, there's also this undercurrent theme of like reporting versus PR, which comes up a few times. It comes up in one of the early scenes in the hotel when Kolchak is meeting the Air Force lady, and Vincenzo is like, you should write a piece on her. She's really amazing. She's done all these things. And Kolchak is like, I don't do PR. Then obviously he has a couple of scenes with the lady who does PR for the hotel, like the PR lady. And then there's this other beat when they're at the this exhibition where these other professors in like the physics department or some other thing are like, our funding's getting cut. Can you write articles for us to kind of drum up support? So it was kind of interesting. I wanted to ask you guys if you had seen that undercurrent in any other Kolchak episodes of like, obviously he does a different type of reporting than Vincenzo would want him to do, but like this idea of this sort of commercial PR type of storytelling versus real reporters, is that a thing?
I don't know if I've seen I know there was an episode where Vincenzo was really pushing that he only write positive stories because people only want happy news. That's not really PR though, so I don't know. Luke, I can't think of any. Can you?
I mean, I can think of times he's been assigned a profile or he has to write the obituaries. Like, he seems to be assigned to things that he does not want to do. And I think occasionally there has been the case where it's like, can you go write about this new hospital that's opening? That is a little more on the PR reporting side. I think this episode in particularly really leaned into the, like, profile piece as like propaganda versus actually doing reporting. Like, this episode I think really had that undercurrent, but I don't think it's necessarily been a theme other than to say that Kolchak wants to write what Kolchak wants and he doesn't care to be assigned things.
Right. Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. I think maybe just on account of it being the conference and stuff, it was just something that the writer sort of was inserting in a few places, but I thought it was
I think it flows well with the bait, like the kickoff of the story. It kind of fits in with the themes of it, so it makes sense. Jordan, this I know is one of your favorite Kolchak tropes here, is while he's pestering that professor to get him to talk about Mexican history with him, Kolchak happens to see a painting on the wall that is exactly the thing that he's looking for.
Which I think it's at least the third time, it might be the fourth time, where he's literally, it's a painting. He sees a painting that sort of ties things together for him. It's funny. It's a funny thing that this show has chosen to do.
Well, this was the second time in this episode that he's seen a painting.
That's true. That's true, because he saw one in the little the room he gets stuck in, right?
Yeah.
But with this painting, the professor finally starts talking to him, and I'm going to really break down the whole explanation for how this is all working for everyone at home. So bear with me, everyone. Essentially what Kolchak learns is that in Aztec myth, there was a good god and an evil god, who I'm not going to attempt to pronounce their names, but they had a battle. That battle ended in a draw, and a cult sprung up toward the ends of the evil god. And the last major leader of that cult was a warrior who lost the last major battle against the Spanish and had himself mummified afterward, with the request to be brought back at the end of the millennium, brought back to life. And the cult has since then been, fulfilling his wishes to bring the evil god back for, probably an apocalypse in the year 2027. And that is 52 years from the time of this episode, essentially. So the murders happen every 52 years, and 52 years from this period of time of Kolchak is going to be the end of the world. And that is because, as the professor explains, the Aztec calendar works on a 52-year cycle. So this is all repeating. We've seen this in Kolchak before, repeating like loops with these evil characters, and Kolchak just has to be coming in when it's kicking up again. And of course, what they do every 52 years is the mummy kind of just needs to be fed every 52 years in the lead up to 2027. And that involves a sacrifice of, as we've said, 5 people, 4 unwilling victims who are warriors, and then 1 willing victim of great physical beauty who will be treated like a god for a year and must learn to play the flute.
I have to say, I know this was kind of a huge exposition dump scene, and it like kind of had to happen to explain things, but compared to some of the other episodes, I thought it was at least it made sense. Like comparing this to, Jane, you didn't see this, but the motorbike episode, like the leaps of logic they had to make that make sense of why he was cutting people's heads off now. It was like, what? At least this is like you get the timeline. You know, it at least lines up in that sense.
Yeah, it was definitely overly complicated. And of course, it doesn't help that like a lot of the Aztec names are really difficult to pronounce and remember. So that made the whole speech just kind of a mouthful for the person the actor who was doing it as well. But I think you get the gist of it. Luke got a lot more than I did, but the gist of it, which is that like stuff is happening in 52-year cycles, and this mummy is waking up every 52 years and needs to get fed, and there's a ritual that feeds him, and there have to be 5 people, and that was like, okay, what's going on?
Absolutely. And they're up to 3 victims, but that night the cult kills again and cuts the heart out of a hero cop.
And it was the same hero cop that Kolchak met in the hallway when he tried to pretend to be the bellboy. It was the guy, he's like, because before he pretends to be the bellboy, he just tries to get in, and he offers, again on the PR theme, he's like, you just won a Medal of Honor. I was at the ceremony where I saw you in that medal. I'll offer to write you an article, a 2-part article if you want. And the guy's like, no, I don't want an article about me. Get away. And then Kolchak comes back as the bellboy and then gets found out. It's that exact same cop who's driving by. So there's this downtown street with a woman who, like, to me looked like she was in a nightgown, but I guess it was supposed to be an evening dress. And she's standing next to a car with its hood up, you know, presumably in some kind of distress that her car is broken down. And so this cop pulls up, and it's a trap, and he is attacked and murdered by the flute people. Do
you remember why he's a hero cop?
Oh,
I don't remember.
He has a Medal of Honor for. Oh, shoot, no, I don't. Why?
I think he just shot somebody. I don't think he was a hero at all.
Really?
Yeah. At some point they say there's like, oh yeah, remember there was like that robbery and you just shot that guy. So we got that at Medal of Honor. I'm like, I'm not sure that that's a hero move.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I didn't realize that was why.
I mean, it just was very funny where it just like he was named a hero for killing a man. I'm like, okay, well this is part of the problem we have in 2022.
Yeah, and he was supposed to make a speech at a local school, and he was very nervous about it, but never fear.
I really want to know what that speech was. It was just like, He was running. His back was to me, and I was very afraid of that back. I got to tell you that right now. It was very threatening back to me.
I was.
People always said I had an itchy finger. I just proved it.
Oh. But he never had to make the speech because he died instead.
Got his heart cut out with a dull blade instead.
The butter knife.
Kolchak, at any rate, has continued his research now that he's kind of learned all about this evil god and these sacrifices, etc., etc. And his own personal research has kind of brought him to the fact that this last sacrifice is going to happen tonight before 12:10, because at 12:10 Venus will rise in the sky, and Venus is the representation of the good Aztec god who destroys the evil Aztec god. So unless the evil Aztec god gets his sacrifice for 12:10, he won't complete the ritual. The cult will not be successful. And Kolchak realizes, like, to figure this out, I'm going to have to go to the highest staircase in Chicago to stop him. And it leads to a really weird scene where he's trying to go through Vincenzo's Rolodex to find like a city planner, to ask the city planner where the highest staircase is.
It was very like he goes. It was just a weird way to get the exposition out, is because Kolchak needs to tell somebody what he has figured out in order to let the audience know. And so they've created this scene where he's at the office and he's rifling through Vincenzo's desk, basically looking at Vincenzo's contact list. And Vincenzo comes in, he's like, what are you doing? And then Kolchak explains everything. And this is another scene, Jordan, like you were describing, where Vincenzo's like, what? You're insane. And it does sound kind of insane. And then Kolchak's like, so I need this guy's number. And Vincenzo's like, no, you can't have it. So he never gets the number. He never gets to call the guy, but he suspects that the highest staircase in Chicago is in the sports stadium. So rather than confirm his suspicion by making this phone call, he just goes to the sports stadium anyway.
Well, it's an odd thing because this show has these like expository scenes every now and then, but they also have the tool of the voiceover. So it's like it could have, I'm not saying it would have worked better, but it works. If the whole point of the scene was just to give that info dump, you could have just had him driving on the street and going, anyways, I found out it's the biggest staircase from old Johnny Tutu, and he told me, so here I go.
That's
true. It works just as well, right?
Yeah, that is true. I never thought of that. Strange.
But you love the expository scenes. You're always talking about how much you enjoy them.
Yeah. Sometimes you know what? If you don't notice it, it works well. But if you're as a viewer sitting there going, why are they just giving all this information here? You know, with 7 minutes left, you notice it's because they've just run out of time and they didn't do a good job of planting it as the episode went.
Yeah, it was very late in the episode. I think having an expository scene around the halfway point is usually good. But we already had, like we talked about, we already had one of those this episode. So it's like having another one just seemed a little bit, especially when it didn't amount to anything.
Yeah, and it's immediately after the last exposition scene, too. So they're pretty quick and fast. But essentially just gets him to the hockey arena, and he'll wander around and finally see some of these, like, this Aztec cult walk out of a room. So he goes in there and finds the vice president, Pepe, preparing to sacrifice himself for the cult. He's, like, drinking a thing of painkillers to prepare himself. And Pepe kind of explains, yeah. They installed me as vice president a year ago, given me everything I wanted. I've had a great time. And Kolchak obviously is like, don't do it, man. Don't kill yourself. Like, it's not worth it. And I really like that Pepe's just like, he's like, a deal's a deal. I said I'd do it, and I'm going to do it.
No, and not only that, he basically says, I've done it so, well, it's a couple of reasons. He said, I'm basically going to get anything I want for this year. And I've lived a year that people very seldom get. I've had all these women, and I've had all this money, and I've had all these various entertainment things. So I've got everything I want, and I now have enough money to give to my family, so I know they're going to be fine for the rest of my life. So for me, it's fine, and it's an interesting argument to make, is that's the reason he's willing. It's like, well, I got what I wanted out of it.
Yeah, and he also describes how he came from poverty, and he's like, I probably would have been killed. It was interesting. He was like, I probably would have been killed by the cops when pretty soon anyway. Which I was sort of like, well, that's pretty big deal. And he would have ended up being a box boy. And I was like, what's a box boy? I was like, a stock boy? Like somebody who restocks warehouses? Is that what a box boy is?
I guess so. Yeah,
I think that's what it was, yeah.
So he didn't want to be a box boy, and he wanted his mom to be looked after. So it was like, I sort of felt for the guy. This is sort of the first time that this character actually sort of appears to have any kind of personality or soul.
You
Besides,
get to see Eric Estrada flex those acting muscles.
that's right. Besides being just kind of a douche, which he was for most of the episode.
But it's great too because like the cult comes back in, catches Kolchak with Pepe, and Pepe's like, obviously he's not been sacrificed yet, so he's like, hey, don't worry, Kolchak. I'll tell. Like he just nods at them. They're like, okay, we won't touch this guy, and he's like, don't worry, Kolchak. As long as I'm alive, they won't kill you. Let's go get sacrificed. But it mostly is just to give a reason why they would drag Kolchak along to the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And like they climb all of these hockey stairs. They climb so many hockey stairs up to the sacrificial altar, which is a table that's in front of another table that has the mummy on it.
Yep. And then there's two other guys there, and there's the flute. One of the guys is now this time Pepe is not playing the flute. There's another guy playing the flute. I guess
You can't be sacrificed and play a flute.
Pepe only gets to play the flute for the other 4 deaths. He is not
That's
allowed
right.
to play himself out.
I mean, it's a hard job being a hotel owner and being a shareholder. You got all these board meetings at night,
Yeah.
cutting out all these hearts. But as sort of Pepe lays down on the table to get sacrificed, and Kolchak kind of like half-heartedly is just like, you could still be anything you want, even if it is a box boy. And really apropos to nothing, Pepe's just laying there as they're like putting their like knife above his chest, and then he's just like, you know what? Nah, I'm not going to do it. And he just hops on the table and kind of like scuttles off down the road, and like all the cult members, like it's some sort of like Three Stooges sketch, all like freak out and start chasing after him down the road. It's very funny. It's just like they all just run out of the scene together.
They all just bounce, leaving Kolchak by himself with the mummy sarcophagus there.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, Kolchak like falls down the stairs and like hurts his ankle or something. I don't know, who cares? It is all just so that the mummy can like get up, and it's like, it's a
Slowly
cool mummy.
make his way over.
Yeah, it's a cool mummy character because it's like, it looks really mummified. They did a like nice job on the makeup on this actor. He like pulls out a sword and like takes a swing at Kolchak, and Kolchak dodges it, and then the mummy disappears, and Kolchak's like looking at his watch to figure out, it's like, is it 12:10 yet? I can't decide. And it's mostly just a setup to, I guess the mummy's gonna like reappear for a second, take another swing at him, and Kolchak will duck that one, and then he'll be like, oh, I guess my watch is a little fast.
Yep.
Yeah, because then the mummy's legit gone, and it's after 12:10, and that's the end. And the other guys never come back. Nobody comes back for the box or anything.
I do find, we mentioned this on very, very early on, Luke, that, you know, they liked setting up villains in this show that sort of are, that seem to be undefeatable. There are these huge powerhouse kind of figures, and so he has to come up with creative ways to beat them. And I think they've sort of just ran out of ideas, because the last couple episodes, it seems like they just kind of wilt at the end. Like, it's just like this is just like, all right, time's up. And then even the next episode, it's just like, it's over. Like, it just, everyone I think watching the show knows that's not the show's strength. Like, they don't choreograph fight scenes very well. It's not an action show, but it seems like even taking that into consideration, the end result seems like an afterthought in these episodes.
Well, they botch, what they do is they botch the ticking clock of this episode. It's like 12:10. You have to get to 12:10 without Eric Estrada getting killed. Like, that's a perfectly good ticking clock for Kolchak to have to do. But they don't really keep track of what time it is. So when Eric Estrada runs off, you don't really know how much time's left before he's gonna die. And also everything's related to, like, that guy's the one who has to be sacrificed. But as soon as he runs off, the story changes where it's like, oh, I guess the mummy could also just get up itself and cut out Kolchak's heart and still be successful.
Well,
And
yeah,
even
that's
then-
what I was wondering. I'm like, is the mummy trying to finish his own ritual? And if so, then clearly this is not subscribed to what it's supposed to be.
I didn't think that's what it was. I think it was just ticked off that it knew it only had a short amount of time, and it was ticked off that the ceremony was ruined. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Right.
So it's just
And
kind of an angry guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vengeful now. I even thought, like, the gag where Kolchak looks at his watch, I didn't get that he was looking at it and he thought it was currently 12:10. Like, they didn't even land that gag where his watch, like, if that's the case, like, that's a good gag that, like, he's trying to survive till 12:10. He gets there, thinks he's safe, and then he's like, oh shit, my watch is fast. But they don't even really land that ticking clock very well. They just never land any of those beats. So, like, just a bunch of stuff happens and then the mummy falls over.
Yeah, and you'd also think, like, and I don't think they use this at all, but, like, they're in a sports stadium. Like, they could have put a big clock on the wall too
Yeah.
that could have been part of the shot that we could have seen. So it's not like we had to have Kolchak looking at his watch every other shot. Like there could have been a way to incorporate the time into the scene much better, and they just.
But you're both right. That's what this episode's missing, and I guess I didn't even realize it till we started speaking about it. It's the momentum, and that having that time would have given that sense of propulsion and that sense of urgency that this episode doesn't really have, because they really want to just have him go around and talk to various kind of vendors, very quirky people, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, with a couple minutes left, he better do this by 12:10. You're like, yeah, you could have just done that at the beginning and kind of made it an interesting, I mean, the whole episode could have taken place near the end where he's, I don't know, it's that pressure of time. But I mean, it's maybe asking too much for an episode that they've established what this show is.
Yeah, but they also could have done the simplest thing, which is like made like every murder take place at 12:10 at night or something. Right. And like that would have been even just that to kind of set that up early on would have been a little bit more interesting. But,
right.
It does end, though, on a great voiceover where Carl's just like, well, I stopped the final sacrifice, but will it prevent the apocalypse in 52 years? I'll be dead by 27. Will you?
Dun, dun,
I'm just like, Jordan will be. That's 5 years from now. He's not going to make it.
Holy moly. Come on. If I keep smoking those pipes.
This is a reason enough just to push through till 2027 to see if the mummy comes back. Because
see if Kolchak pulled it off. We have to wait, you guys. 5 years from now, we'll check back in.
Yeah. I have a feeling that he's not going to come back, but the mummy's eyes did open right at the end in the last shot of the show. So
now, here's a question for you. On the IMDb trivia, they say that is a goof, that the actor shouldn't have done that. But do you think that was a active choice?
Oh, totally. I mean,
yeah, it was a choice.
I think what they did, I think that was my guess when I was looking at that was not why they shot that. That was probably a bit in between stuff where the actor opened his eyes, because it didn't really seem like it had a lot of intention to it. But I think they intentionally decided to use it at the end of the episode to make it more exciting. Cut it in there for the
twist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
I did like, my favorite part of it was just that it was like all talking about a date, the far off date of 2027. I'm like, oh, we're almost there. We're almost there, you guys.
Yeah, 52 years after Kolchak. It's coming up.
But he was right. He didn't make it.
Oh,
it's true. Darren McGavin, unfortunately, rest in peace, did not make it.
I did think that when I watched it. It made me kind of sad. I'm like,
I thought the exact same thing. I was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're dead.
You're not going to get there.
All right, you guys ready to move on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here is the IMDb summary for episode 18, The Nightly Murders.
Tuesday, 11:15 p.m. If you know anything about Chicago politics, you'll understand why a 63-year-old ward captain was braving the ungentle hour and the less gentle streets. You see, Ward Captain Leo J. Ramutka was returning home from a wake, and off Wiedersehen to a loyal registered voter he knew would one day meet him in that great polling station in the sky. What Ward Captain Ramutka failed to foresee was just how soon that meeting would be.
Plans to turn a failing medieval museum into a party center animate the bewitched black armor of an infamously misanthropic knight.
I love that the knight was just misanthropic, and that was the entire motivation for the story.
He's just a scamp.
He just doesn't like people, and he's pissed. That's it.
You want to talk about a villain with a very weak piece of motivation. This one had it in spades.
He's a villain because he's a villain. That was pretty much the explanation.
The episode begins with a murder. The death of 63-year-old ward captain Leo J. Ramutkin, a man with the face of a Dick Tracy villain.
I had to look up what a ward captain was. Did you guys know before this what a ward captain was?
No.
Not at all.
Yeah. Did you look up what a ward captain was?
No.
No, neither of you looked up. I looked up what a ward captain was. A ward captain, it's a political position. So basically the ward captain they're elected and they're a member of a party, but they're basically, they represent the party at kind of a grassroots level in a riding ward and help ensure like voter registration, election awareness. They distribute party literature, trying to get people out to like party-related events leading up to elections, that kind of thing. It's often a volunteer position, or they would get a small stipend for it. But technically, it's an elected position, and it's where some people like start their career in politics. Will start off as being like a ward cap or precinct captain. There's various names for it, but
All I know is
so
he gets
that's what it is.
crossbowed like no one's business.
He does, yeah. That's the end of the ward captain.
I mean, Leo J. He might have been a late bloomer. He became ward captain. Captain started his political career at 63. But you're right; it ends quickly as he walks in his front door, and the bolt from a crossbow kills him, and a knight in a suit of armor stands at the top of the stairs holding that crossbow.
That was
another really slow moving villain for an episode.
I know, right? Like that's what these heavy guys that just lurch along. But that was definitely one of the fastest murder starts that I've seen on almost any show. Like literally there were like three, like the guy pulled up to his house, walked inside, bam, murdered at the front door. off we go to the races. Like, yeah.
This is a Kolchak staple. You got to kill someone so fast off the bat.
At least we didn't get stock footage of some other guy at a football game or whatever.
Well, right? Yes, exactly. It was exciting and gripping, and there was a knight.
But I mean, well, this villain might be a little slow and lumbering. I think the big exciting bit of this episode is Kolchak arrives at the crime scene looking for a scoop, and as always, there's a police captain who's already there working. But this particular one is interesting because the police have put on the quote Edward R. Murrow homicide to investigate the case.
Yeah, Vernon,
a gentleman named Vernon W. Roche.
Yeah, he's a great character. I thought he was. This is probably the second. Maybe third, but I would say the second really interesting detectives or captains or sergeant, whatever he is, as the sort of like slight antagonist to Kolchak. This guy is something different though. I like that he just like waxes poetic all the time.
Yeah, he's he's supposed to be extremely educated, and he speaks very philosophically, and is not at all useful as a cop. So, when Kolchak sort of asks initially what the cop may be thinking about this crime or the motivation, he gives this speech about Chicago having 6 million personalities pressed together in a configuration as complex as it is alienating. I wrote that down because I thought it was cool. And then he just sort of talks about the disintegration of the family and vertically mobile people and people being disappointed. And then their personalities become atomized and they erupt in a force of rage. Like he just has this idea that crime is caused by the breakdown of society and has all these theories about why and how. And
he looks great. He looks like what's that guy from Murder on the Nile? Poirot. He's got like a real detective mustache.
Oh, Poirot. Yes, yeah. He's got he's got sideburns and he's got a mustache. He's got kind of a long face. He's very tall. I can't remember if he was wearing 3-piece suits, but he was very well put together.
And unlike most of the cops that Kolchak bumps into, he actually seems to really like reporters. He seems to really enjoy talking to Kolchak. It's very interesting. And it's almost a funny twist because usually they're just like, the cops are dumb, loud, and hate the reporters. And this guy is smart, likes Kolchak right off the bat, and is like really trying to talk to him about stuff. And he's putting up with Kolchak being annoying, pulling out his tape recorder, forcing him to record things. And Kolchak seems genuinely flustered both by how smart this man is because he can't understand him and how friendly he is.
I didn't think that he couldn't understand him necessarily. I just think that Kolchak was immediately realizing that what this guy was saying to him was not useful, right? Like Kolchak is trying to get details, like police-related details, and this guy is just going on a rant.
I think what it is specifically, though, is Kolchak wants specific answers quickly, and he just doesn't have time for it. This guy is just verbose, and that's what it is. So it's like, even if there's an answer in there, Kolchak's like, I don't have time for it. Just tell me what, was it a knife? Was it a gun? What is it? That's all he wants the answer for.
Yeah, absolutely. And at one point he says, like, I can't remember if it was this scene or a later scene when the cop goes on a rant and Kolchak sort of says, you took me 2 hours to get out of there. And he's not able to continue on with his research and his reporting because this guy's just holding him up with these long rants.
He loves to talk. He loves to philosophize, and it's too esoteric for old Kolchak. But shortly after this murder takes place, a second murder happens. A Chicago real estate mogul is murdered. He's driving home. He's pulling into his driveway. He's just like pulls in as you would with your car, and that knight is waiting there with a jousting lance that he shoves straight through that guy's front windshield and just skewers him on the spot.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. We're getting to see a lot of different medieval weapons in this episode, and it's pretty fun because the knight just has access, apparently, which we'll find out why, has access to a plethora of weapons.
Every murder's different. Like the next one happens the next night, and it's the knight shows up. He's swinging a mace around this time, and a soft drink mogul is like laying in bed. A gentleman named Brewster Hawkins, who started the Canadian American Leisure Corp, which I thought was a great name for a soft drink company. And the knight just walks in and just like smashes him in the head with that fucking mace.
Yeah, and he keeps calling out for Charles, who's presumably his butler. And he's just like, Charles! And he just yells for Charles as he's being murdered by this knight. And it's actually, like, I just thought it was actually kind of cool because, yes, the knight is a slow-moving villain, so it's a little bit goofy, but they've managed in almost every situation to make it believable that the attacks can still make sense. In the first situation, it's quite sudden, like he walks in his door and the knight is at the top of the stairs and shoots the arrow at him, so the knight doesn't have to move. In the second one, he shoots through the window of the car. In the third one, this guy is in bed, and so he's kind of, I mean, he's a little bit encumbered by his, his sheets and covers and all of that kind of stuff, and he looks through his door and there's some kind of lounge or like outer bedroom area where there's a fireplace, and this knight is just walking quite menacingly towards him beside this fireplace. And I was sort of thinking, I'm like, if that happened to me, I think I would probably also freeze. Like, I don't think that I would get out of the bed in time to escape this night.
But
it's pretty scary.
It's funny because whereas some of the villains in this have sort of been these sort of spectral figures that sort of like appear and attack and disappear, why it's effective with this knight is because you don't have to see him traveling to and from the murders. Because if you saw that, it would really take away from it. Because I'm like, how's he getting there?
If he's just riding
leaving
the bus
this place,
in
he's
Chicago.
like slowly trudging down the street. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, don't worry about that. You don't need to worry about that. It's scary when he's in the room.
Yeah.
Also, do we notice that the guy, because it's going to become a plot point later on, because the knight steps on a phone when he's walking over to hit the guy with the mace, and so it becomes a thing about the amount of weight it would have taken to crush the phone. But then later on when Kolchak comes in and he's talking to the cop about it, and they're like, hey, he's like, what do you think happened here with the phone? And they're like, oh, they think whoever murdered the guy smashed the phone so that he wouldn't make a call, which is actually a pretty good explanation. But then he's like, what about those phones? And the guy had 2 more phones on his nightstand. And I don't know if that was like a rich guy thing, like he has a phone for office and a phone for his butler and a phone for whatever, but I'm like, he had 3 phones in his room? Isn't that odd? I
don't remember I remember when there were phones in the office, but were those phones from the guy's room? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I thought it was just Vincenzo's collection of antique phones.
No,
that's later on.
Oh.
Much later, he'll go to that bedroom to investigate, and there are 2 more phones on the nightstand. But Jordan, I mean, the real big question is, why was one of his 3 bedroom phones in the middle of the floor?
yeah, he just had it on the floor for the knight to stand on. I mean, it's like, because the knight needed to stand on something, that's why.
At any rate, so there's now been 3 murders by this night, and Kolchak has started investigating, and he's trying to track down some information about this crossbow bolt from the first murder, and he'll go talk to a man who runs a gun store, which not much happens in the scene other than like explaining that it's a crossbow bolt that you would get from medieval crossbow. What I did like about, as with most of these things, when Kolchak visits a source, he's kind of a bit of a character. It's always a character, and this particular character, I guess, is someone that Kolchak has visited repeatedly because I guess he knows about guns, and he doesn't want to be bribed. What Kolchak has been doing is he's promised to write this man's autobiography. So while Kolchak's there, he has to stand there. This man will dictate to him like 3 new chapters of his autobiography.
Yeah, that was a great pickup.
I thought this was really good.
Well, I was going to ask you guys if you had seen this guy before. Was he actually from previous episodes, or they were just kind of implying that he was a previous source?
No, he's new. It's just one of those things where they've built the world a little bit. There's this past history that we don't know about. I thought it was really a good scene, and these are the sort of things that work well in this show. This little bit of world building, these other characters, and only a few times I think we've had people like that. Guy who works in the morgue. He came back a couple times, but most of the time it's like a one-off, just to be like, oh yeah, he's dealt with these people before in the past.
I mean, the one nice part is, he's like, I can't help you with the crossbow, I can help you with the gun, but like there is a medieval museum you could go check out. And it's one of the rare occasions in Kolchak when he goes to talk to another expert, it's actually going to tie it directly into the crime that's happening. But he heads to this medieval museum where he meets the curator, Mendel Boggs. And Mendel Boggs is in a bit of a tense situation with the interior decorator who's there, Minerva Musso. Because you see, the museum's fallen on hard times and has recently been purchased by a soda corporation, which is turning it into a medieval-themed discotheque. And that soda corporation? Why, it's the Canadian-American Leisure Corp.
What a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought... so they start the scene at the museum before Kolchak arrives. They start with the scene with the woman and the man fighting. And I thought they were like a married couple. I wrote down, couple... is bickering and hates each other because basically the interior decorator is trying to move all of these artifacts around and the guy is freaking out about it. But I really just thought that it was like some woman who wanted to redecorate and her husband liked his collection of medieval stuff.
What I like, and I don't think this is spoiling anything, is later on when they're trying to figure out who this person is who's been doing these murders. I can't remember the guy's name. What's his name, Luke? The
How can you
curator?
not remember Mendel Boggs?
Mendel Boggs. They sort of think maybe he's the person who does it, and I remember thinking like, there's no way. The guy's like 75 years old. He can't put that armor on. He's not a very good culprit.
Yeah, but I mean, old people do walk slower, and the knight was walking very slowly.
Good point.
You never know.
I just want to give a shout out to the writer of this episode because the names in it are like top notch. Soda Mogul, Brewster Hawkins, curator Mendel Boggs, interior decorator Minerva Musso. These are all like A-tier names.
These are like Harry Potter level names at this point.
At any rate, he doesn't learn much at the museum other than like it's a little tense there and that definitely medieval weapons were used to kill these people. So Kolchak decides he's going to go check into the death of the soda mogul instead. And he has a friend at the telegraph company who makes him a fake telegraph from Brewster Hawkins, in which it's just like, come visit me at my home, my old college chum. And Kolchak basically flashes this telegram to his very like surly butler to get in the door, basically. He's just like, see, I knew your boss and he invited me here, so you must tell me all about his murder and his soda concern.
Is that fraud though, Luke?
Yeah, but Kolchak commits fraud every other day. This is fine. This is every day for Kolchak.
Well, I don't know if it constitutes, because telegram companies are private. It's not the U.S. Postal Service, so it's not mail fraud.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right, I'll allow it.
Yeah.
But really, all Kolchak gets out of this is he eventually gets caught for not knowing enough about the soda man's soda business, so he couldn't possibly be friends with him.
Yeah, the butler is like, if you're such good friends with him, why have you not received his gift baskets every year? And Kolchak's like, oh, you got me. I didn't get a gift basket. We're not friends.
Yeah. I like that his gift baskets to his friends every year are just like mix for their drinks. It's not alcohol, just the mix for your drink.
Well, it's a soda company. So it's a great gift basket. I would be really happy if I got a selection of fancy ass sodas every Christmas.
I'll keep that in mind.
Yes, you should.
But what he really learns is he sees the phone that was crushed by the knight. It got stepped on. And this basically really puts Kolchak on his next thing. He really wants to know how much pressure it would take to crush a telephone. And to do this, to find this information out, he heads back to the INS office. He sabotages his desk phone just so he can call a phone company technician to come in to fix it. And while the technician is there, he's going to ask him, how much pressure would you need to crush a phone? The answer, 420 PSI.
Yeah. Again, this was another scene where I have no problem with them doing the scene, but it could have just as easily been a voiceover. It could have just, because he's done it before, where he's like, anyways, I talked to a guy in the phone company, it would take 400 pounds to crush a phone. Anyways, back off to the museum or wherever.
Yeah, but it allowed for like this funny opportunity where the phone guy realized that there were several other contraband phones in the office, these like older style phones, and he confiscates them, and Vincenzo gets pissed off because it was like phones that he liked. And then Kolchak tells Vincenzo and Updike that he's redecorating and he's going to replace them with plants. And then he leaves. And it was just a great little scene. It was just the right little nugget of humor that I think was good.
I'm pretty sure Vincenzo says at one point when all the phones get taken, he's like, we had a good thing going. It was like something like that. And I was like, what? I don't understand.
What
Like,
happens is because the phone guy realizes Kolchak sabotaged his own phone to get him there, the phone guy's pissed off, and he's like, I'm taking away all these bootleg phones in the office. And, Vincenzo's quite upset. And I found out why, Jordan.
Why?
Because at the time, Americans were not allowed to own phones. AT&T had a monopoly and would assign customers phones. So it was illegal to have additional phones. So if a phone tech came to your home, saw a contraband phone they had not assigned you, they were legally within their rights to confiscate the phone from your home or business.
Okay, that makes more sense. So it's a weird timestamp of this period, because I was like, what is he getting away with? He's like just plugging some phones, but that answers that.
Okay, so people would rent their phone from the phone company along with getting the service, and they were not allowed to have additional telephones.
Yes, the phone company said at the time that they could not have other phones plugged into the phone lines because it would damage the infrastructure. So they had to keep a tight lid on who had a phone and where they got it from.
Right. But were they tracking the soda magnet's phones? Because clearly the soda magnet had several additional phones as well.
He's got that money. He can pay for it, baby.
He's bribing the AT&T people all the time, I guess.
But what's important here is Kolchak's like 420 PSI. Why, that suit of armor, it weighed 400 pounds.
So therefore, a person inside the suit of armor would have been exactly the right weight to crush the phone.
And they were moving so slowly, surely it was that old man, Mendel Boggs. I'll just Scooby-Doo the mask off and I'll catch him in the act.
That's right.
Yeah, he's like, I noticed he has bad knees. He moves slowly.
Now, Kolchak needs to confirm his suspicion here that it's Mendel Boggs, so he goes to visit the interior decorator, Minerva Musso, at her home to ask her if she's seen anything strange while she's been interior decorating, which leads to a very strange scene on its own right.
I could not follow this scene. So she first talks about how he's a weirdo and he speaks to the artifacts, and she'd seen him speaking either to the artifacts or talking into a mirror in poetry, talking about cleaving things in twain. But then there was also something about David Bowie.
She was bragging about that she was supposed to be a designer for David Bowie's home.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's a weird. Kolchak comes to her house. The door is open, so he lets himself in, and he finds her on the phone in bed, and she's just like, so he steps. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. Your front door is open." And she's on the phone with a friend. And she's like, "Oh, my friend on the phone, a man has entered my room," and she's very excited that a stranger has walked into her bedroom.
Oh, yes. And she also is like, I wonder if he's here for robbery or rape. And then he says neither. And then she seems very disappointed that he is not there to either rob her or rape her. And then she hangs up on her friend. I'm like, what?
Well, that's just what it is. He's like, "I'm a reporter." And then she's like very disgusted. She's like, "Ugh," a reporter hangs up and she's like, "I'm not going to tell you about how I'm decorating David Bowie's home if that's what you're here for."
Right. Okay. That was the David Bowie thing. Because I didn't catch it the first time. And then it was like at the end of the scene, somebody mentioned it. And I was like, what? What is happening? What does David Bowie have to do with this episode?
Yeah. And as you said, she says the only weird thing she's seen about Boggs at the museum is like sometimes he'll recite poetry to the armor or swing around some of the weapons when he thinks no one's looking. But all of it doesn't matter because Kolchak hears the clanking of metal coming, and soon a knight is smashing through the door, coming to kill Minerva Musso.
Yeah, smashes like shining styles through the door, knocks a dresser, because he puts a dresser in front of the door to try to stop him, but it just like kind of gets knocked on top of him somehow, and then so he's like out of commission. It doesn't care about him for some reason because he's the star.
Did you notice Kolchak's now classic misogyny came into the forefront here?
No, what was that?
He's pushing the dresser in front of the door, and Minerva Musso's like, "What are you doing?" And he turns around and he's like, "Get in the bathroom, you dumb broad."
I missed that line.
It was like so angry at her. I was like, Jesus, calm down, Kolchak.
Well, he's gonna feel bad about himself because then the knight goes in and chops her to death.
Chops her,
and that's the last thing you said to her.
I know.
An axe this time. He's got an axe this time. He's always switching it up this night. He loves to switch it up.
Yeah, it's great. That's what I meant. You could just see all of these different weapons.
Yeah, that's right. So what is it? It was crossbow, lance, mace, and now axe.
Yes,
that's right.
Right.
But the police arrive. Captain Roche is there and uses some smelling salt to wake up Kolchak, and the two of them are really butting heads by this point in the episode. Like, Roche is implying that he thinks that Kolchak murdered her. Kolchak thinks that Rolsh is kind of a bad detective who's just trying to like milk him for information because he can't do his own job. He's a bit of a lazy investigator, if you will. And Roche is like, well, I'll bury you in paperwork, and if that won't get you to tell me what's going on, let's go in the bathroom right now and I'll waterboard you.
He says something, but what is it actually?
He tells one of the officers, he's like, you're not going to listen to me? He turns to the officers and fill up the bathtub.
Yeah. I wrote,
right.
He quotes Shakespeare and then threatens Kolchak using complex vocabulary. That was my note.
This does cow Kolchak, so Kolchak kind of lets him in on what he thinks is going on. He's like, I think the curator Mendel Boggs is doing it. They head down to the medieval museum, and he accuses Mendel of the murders. And, of course, this is the scene you're talking about where the police are like, well, let's see if the shoe fits. And they literally, like, disassemble the suit of armor and try to forcibly shove it onto the curator's head.
And it doesn't at all go on. And so if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Yep. It's never truer than it was that day.
So he's exonerated and the mystery continues. But it is that armor. Like, we've kind of established at this point that it's that armor. It's from that museum.
Kolchak recognizes it from the attack. He's like, I saw that exact armor. I know exactly how this is all coming together.
And it's also the same exact weapons, but the weapons don't have blood on them. Like, the weapons have been cleaned off every time.
They've all been wiped off on the victim's clothing.
That's right.
It's very funny because this is the scene where Roche, this is a very small thing, but Roche basically turns to Carl and is just like, listen, Carl, I 100% you believe a knight in armor is killing people, but I actually think you suffer from auto-suggestion. I think it's turned your brain into onion dip. And I was like, sitting there watching this, I'm just like, you know, it'd be great if this turned out to be true, because like Kolchak rarely proves anything at the end of the episode. He rarely gets the story written. He rarely has any people believe him. What if this whole time Carl's just like highly delusional? We've just been watching his delusions all season.
What was the show that it ended like that? Was it Soap?
I don't know.
I'm sorry?
I think the sitcom Soap ended, and he found out it was a guy in some sort of mental asylum, and he was dreaming the whole thing. I'm pretty sure.
Really?
I forget you're 15 years older than us.
Yeah, sorry.
There's what was it? The Bob Newhart show or whatever. He woke up in bed in the final episode.
That was a dream.
It was a dream. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't, and I think St. Elmo's Fire has a similar ending, right?
Oh, maybe I'm thinking St. Elmo's Fire, not Soap. Sorry. I'm mixing up Soap and St. Elmo's Fire. I didn't watch either of the shows, that's why. At
any rate, Carl's got back on the beat. He's trying to look into the armor's origin now, because he's like, the armor has something to do with it. If it doesn't fit Mendel Boggs, something's going on with that armor. And he goes to a shop, a storefront that solely sells people coats of arms. That's it. That's their whole business.
And they have a really like good racket going on, because he goes in and they immediately ask him to introduce himself. And when he says his name, they start saying, oh, you're descended from this line of people. And there was this famous duke in Poland named Kolchak, and he did this, and he fought in Warsaw. He was called the Lion of Warsaw and all this stuff. But it's all a racket, because basically the woman goes into the back room and she's like, I'm going to get you your crest and you can buy it from us and it'll be engraved. And she picks up this crest, this, art piece or whatever. And it says like McDougal on the bottom. And she cuts off the McDougal part and then brings it back out and is like, this is the coat of arms from the Kolchak family, and tries to get Kolchak to buy it.
I like that Kolchak's like, my grandma always said we were descended from slobs.
Yeah, it's just a weird throwaway line.
At any rate, Kolchak's there because he's going to describe to them the coat of arms he's seen above the armor at the museum. And, well, they are clearly scam artists who just kind of, like, talk up a customer to get them to get the, I believe he buys the, is it the oak he gets, or does he get, like, a nice redwood backing to his
He gets
coat of
the
arms?
oak. He wanted the pine, but they convinced him to get the oak.
Right. They do actually know quite a bit about these coat of arms, because the one he just described, he doesn't have a photo, he describes the coat of arms and they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's the infamous Metacore family of Burgundy. They were very bad people, and the last of their line was particularly a misanthrope who he skipped the crusade so he could stay home to brutalize the people at home.
He was a misanthrope.
He just waited for all the other wealthy landowners to go off to war so that he could just pillage the countryside.
And not only to do that, he practiced the black arts and had a necromancer build him that suit of armor, which was rendered invincible by its powers. So he could not be killed while wearing that suit of armor. And it wasn't until Pope Gregory IX blessed a battle axe to penetrate the armor that he was finally killed and taken down in medieval Europe. But not before he whispered his dying breaths, where he vowed he'd never permit music and gaiety around his resting place. So now he's mad they're building a disco.
I'm doing the same thing when I die.
No music or gaiety at your resting place?
No, not at my resting place. Somewhere else, please.
Yeah. You might make sure you put a sign up just in case somebody decides to have a disco there.
I believe that's on his tombstone you've already purchased, Richard.
That's right. But I have to say, if you have, let's say you have a magical suit that can only get beaten by one other magical element, don't have that be anywhere near you. You know? Put them at the other side of the world. Make sure the axe is at one side and the costume's at another.
Well, it still doesn't really explain to me, is he buried under the museum? Or is it just his resting place because that's where his armor is now?
It's unclear.
I mean, I think we're supposed to think... The resting place thing threw me. I think we're supposed to think that somehow this armor obviously is mystical because it's built by a necromancer, which we know has to do with the dead, and so maybe his soul has entered it. But the weird part is they said at his resting place. I'm like, well, clearly he's been transported far away from his resting place to Chicago.
Yeah. As has all of his weapons, just happened to be... Everything happens to have been transported together.
This museum, actually, too bad it lost all its funding because it clearly had, a lot of money because they got all this guy's stuff there.
Yeah, it had some really great artifacts.
But Kolchak, with this information, he goes and breaks into this medieval museum at night to, I'm not sure what his plan is, to look around. What I like is the armor at night. It just when it doesn't have someone to murder, it just kind of walks around night at the museum style. It's just kind of wandering the museum, hanging out. Kolchak snaps a few pics of it walking around, and of course this apparently angers the armor. It's just no photos, man. That's not cool.
No photos of the museum.
And then obviously there's a bit of a run through the museum as Kolchak's dodging it, throwing a spear at him, and he's jumping around. Kolchak makes some really weird noises in this fight too. He's like, whoa, whoa.
And the knight is just lumbering so slowly along. It's a very awkward thing. And Kolchak at one point stops at the top of a small staircase, sort of stands there, doesn't move, and then just rolls down this, falls arbitrarily down the stairs for no real reason. And the knight's still coming after him.
Darren McGavin loves a pratfall.
I guess.
But Jordan, this is kind of the thing what you were implying earlier, is that for some reason, this medieval museum in Chicago also happens to have the holy axe blessed by Pope Gregory in a glass case. So Kolchak is able to smash that glass case, pull out these axe, which is too heavy for him to lift. That's the thing. It's so big, it's too heavy for him to lift. And as the knight approaches, he manages to get enough strength to lightly tap the side of the suit of armor, very lightly. He very lightly taps the suit of armor with the axe. That basically causes the armor to lose all integrity, fall forward, and impale itself on the rest of the axe.
Mm-hmm.
It was such an awkward ending, and I wasn't even clear what I didn't really get the battle axe plot point when it had happened. And so Kolchak's pulling out this axe, and I'm going, why did you pick this weapon, Kolchak? You're so weak and you cannot lift this
lift
thing.
it.
And then the knight just falls and disintegrates on top of this axe, and I didn't realize why. So that actually makes it.
If I was that knight, the first thing I'd do, the first night I lumber around, I'd walk over, get that axe, break it over my knee, and go there.
Yeah.
Now, what are you going to do? Nothing.
Now I'm safe in my own home.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Well, that's the end of it. But here's something we haven't said is ward captain, soda mogul, some other dude driving home, real estate mogul, and interior decorator. All these people were killed by the night, and we haven't said why. And it's because they were all involved in the city planning to get the permits to build a discotheque. This is what the knight has pieced together.
He's done his research better than Kolchak has, and it's not even that things were noisy. It's that they might get noisy later on. He's
it's a
like,
real NIMBY move. This man is really pulling a NIMBY move. He's like, no discotheque in my neighborhood thing.
And he has managed to trace, in particular, so the ward captain obviously has to do with politics and permits, but he's managed to trace this developer who I guess owns the property next door that may become a parking lot for the discotheque when it comes into play. So the Knight has clearly done a lot of research, and I wonder if there was a cut scene where he lumbered into the records department of the city hall, trying to find out who was kind of starting this whole thing. Either that, or what's his face Boggs told the Knight all of the secrets, which I guess better.
That would have been a thing where Boggs was giving the Knight information or controlling him, but that turned out not to be the case.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because what would have been also great is if this is an episode where they had opened a nightclub and like a slasher film, a Knight was killing young people at a nightclub. That's also a more sensible version of this episode.
Yeah, kills the young sexy singer, kills the nightclub owner, kills somebody's bodyguard, yeah. But it would have required a great deal more extras than they usually have the budget for in Kolchak. So
instead, it was about real estate deals and an angry, misanthropic Knight.
Yeah. And just to be clear, the Knight is basically a ghost, so the suit is just full of air.
Yeah. When he beats him, the suit just falls into
Which
place.
actually doesn't make any sense, because if the suit is full of air, then the math doesn't add up for the crushing of the telephone. Because the whole point of the math for the crushing of the telephone was it was suit of armor plus person. But it's not suit of armor plus person. It's just an empty suit of armor filled with air. So,
Otherwise, though, flawless episode.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the logic is perfect.
I mean, we've covered them both, I think, pretty extensively now. I don't know if you guys have any final notes you guys wanted to get into that we didn't cover.
No, I think I got all my stuff.
Great. Well, let's rate these episodes then. So, Jane, you know how this works. Out of a possible 10 stars, what would you give to Legacy of Terror, the Aztec heart sacrifice episode?
So I feel like I'm probably going to rate both of these maybe higher than you guys. I liked both of them much better than I liked the first two episodes of Kolchak that I watched. I just sort of, like I said before, I felt like they were kind of finding their feet in terms of the humorous moments and getting to know some of the secondary characters. And also the first one, Legacy of Terror. I was totally fooled by the plot because I was so into the feminist perspective that was occurring. So I would definitely give this one a 7.5. And the extra 0.5 is for Eric Estrada. He just gets the bump up right there.
You got that Eric Estrada bump.
That's right. Jordan,
what do you think?
Yeah, I don't disagree with in terms of the little humorous bits and stuff. I did think they work, but as now someone who has now watched 17, 18 of these, I'm getting tired of the paint by numbers, and I'm also getting tired of a different culture that's not ours has something weird.
Yes.
It's a monster. And they go down that hole too many times for me, so it is a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I was a little bit dismayed by that sort of racist kind of it's an ancient culture and they're weird.
And you know what? We didn't even talk about it that much. In terms of the Kolchak episodes, this is faint praise, but this is the least, I think, offensive of the ones we've seen so far. Would you agree with me on that, Luke?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's just of the ones where they're stealing from a culture to make a horror villain, I was just well, this might be the least offensive version of that we've seen thus far, as far as these things go. I agree with Jordan in the way that it is very much a paint by numbers episode. I think we've seen this variation quite a few times. But Jane, I think to your point, it is one of the better written versions of it. The beats are funny. There's more twists and turns at work. They had a far more competent writer involved in this one that made it sing a little bit more. It was a lot funnier. It kind of did all the things it does well. It was just inside of a framework we've seen a lot of times. So I'm torn sort of back and forth that way. I'm going to give it a 6. I think it's a solid episode, if not one of their more original. At least it's someone who's I get what this is and I can make it fun.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing too about I don't know what the other episodes were where they were riffing off of cultures, but the one good thing about this is like they have several other characters who are Mexican who are not stereotypes. Like they're just regular people. So there's the consulate guy who's just trying to sell, talk about business in Mexico. There's a very well-educated like professor who's talking about stuff. And even Eric Estrada's character is a person with a little bit of depth, as we discover at the end. So it wasn't just like they plucked some random culture and just only used some bizarre thing that they made up.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think that's what even we were talking about earlier, like the scene where they talk over the woman and they make a point of saying, why are you talking over her? You want us to interview her. Like the writer clearly was smart enough to catch where these tropes were going to be negative and at least to try to give them like a turn. Like the professor who runs the exhibit about Mexico it seems to be a Mexican and also just like thinks Kolchak is an idiot.
Right.
Like he's just like, you're dumb.
Yeah.
You're annoying me. Go away. Like all these things are better than they should have been. So that's why I think like I'm going to give it a 6 just because like I think plot wise they've walked that road too much. But it's like of the ones they've done this way, I think it's by far one of the best versions of it.
Right.
All right. The Nightly Murders, Jane. What do you think about this knight in shining armor?
So I actually also enjoyed this. I thought it was a bit goofier, obviously, because of the things that we talked about of like the knight figuring out about the city permits and also isn't he from France and also all of these things. But I did like how he killed people with a different weapon each time. And I did find that like his attacks were like pretty scary. Like they did a good job of filming it to make him seem quite large and menacing and powerful. And I thought it was kind of fun. So I would probably give this one a 6.5 for me.
Well, we're on the same page, Jen. I'm also giving it a 6.5. I think campy works well in Kolchak, and this one had some fun campy elements, and like it doesn't all quite ring out. It's so funny to me that like the conclusion of it is, the knight just vowed on his deathbed, no fun near me. Like it's such a funny, dumb aspect, and like there are some pretty, like the end is really lackluster, but like there's some moments of fun. It's got some levity. I like it's like the headless motorcycle one. It's so silly that it kind of makes it better, but this isn't nearly as good as the headless motorcycle one. But I'm gonna go 6.5.
See, that was your last point. I agree with Luke. It's like this is similar to the headless horseman or headless motorbike guy, but that was such a better episode and everything was more fun. This just the whole time I was like, this is gonna be dumb, and then at the end I was like, it is dumb. It's a little ghost in a costume that just falls and kills itself. I thought it was too much dumb for me and not enough fun. So I'm only giving it a 4.
Aww.
You didn't even like the detective, eh? Their big police detective who is a match for Kolchak.
That's all fine, but it's just like it's in service of a dumb episode, right? Like all those bits are fine, but they don't add up to anything for me. Like it's bits and pieces. You're like, that's good, and it's like, but for what? So we can have a knight lumber around and then kill himself? Stupid.
Well, that about wraps it up. So Jane, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast again.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
What are your feelings, like having seen some first, like I think it was 3 and 4, and now you've come back to like the penultimate episodes of this show? Do you feel like it changed much between those, or do you feel like it stayed the same?
I do feel like I've said like it's found itself a little bit. I think its limitations, though, are very clear. In particular, the sort of what you guys talked about in terms of like, the villain has to be menacing, but somehow Kolchak is always safe from it because it falls down or something. And I think that's maybe why you guys like the invisible ones so often, because it's a lot easier for them to like create an invisible menace like that UFO or whatever, and then you don't have to deal with these sort of lumbering characters. But I liked it. I think I kind of understand why it was only one season. Because it does seem like it's sort of at the end of its runway. But I also think that it's a show that I would have really liked as a kid if it had been on TV regularly when I was young, because it's exactly like it's just enough of an imaginative spark to be like, oh, what if this was loose in Chicago? What if that was loose in Chicago? And all the ends, even though it remains a mystery, all of the things that you need to solve the mystery are all within proximity and easily accessible or in the same museum or whatever. And so, yeah, I think it's gotten better. But I also sort of question, I'm like, well, how much more could they really do? Like, if there had been a second season, like, what would it have? It would have just been more of the same. And I think that probably would have been the end of it.
I think that's great insights of someone who saw the beginning and is now back at the end. Thank you, Jane.
Thanks, Luke.
And listener, you can, of course, get a hold of us at continuumdrag@gmail.com if you have any thoughts about this episode or anything else, really. And on Instagram and Twitter, we will have clips from these episodes. Definitely mummies swinging swords, and also knights swinging swords. A lot of sword swinging going on.
Yeah, make sure to include the sword swinging, and make sure to include the part where he smashes through the doors with an axe, because that was pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great shining moment, so that'll be there for sure. And you can find those, the handle is @continuumdrag. But that wraps it up. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
See you then. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.